we need to talk about a single strike, one event that may have just completely redefined the war in Ukraine, sending shockwaves from the front lines all the way up to the highest levels of local power. Let's break down what just happened. The date is February 21st, 2026, and this is a date that will almost certainly be remembered as a critical turning point. What unfolded in the last 24 hours has sent ripples from the muddy trenches of the Donbass to the tense negotiating tables in Geneva. And get this, the target was deep inside Russia. We're talking over 1,300 kilometers, that's about 800 miles, from the nearest Ukrainian-held territory. A strike this deep was, well, it was thought to be impossible. It would mean flying a weapon over some of the most heavily defended airspace on the entire planet. And the target? It wasn't just some random military base. No, this was the Vodking's machine building plant. For decades, this place has been the absolute crown jewel of the Kremlin's missile program. It's the birthplace of the Iskander-M, the Yars ICBM, and even that new Oreshnik hypersonic missile Putin loves to call his unstoppable superweapon. Well, on this day, the unstoppable meant something completely unforeseen, because Ukraine just demonstrated a new, long-range capability that fundamentally changes the strategic math of this entire war. They didn't just hit a factory, they hit the very artery of Russia's power. So today, we're going to break down exactly how they pulled this off. We'll look at the incredible new weapon they used, the devastating revenge it triggered, the staggering human cost of this new phase of the war, and the high-stakes political game it just blew wide open. And stay till the end because some shocking things I'm going to reveal in this video. Let's get back to it. All right, let's dive right in and look at the target itself. To really get the significance of this, you have to understand what the Vodkin's plan actually is. This wasn't just a symbolic hit. This was basically a decapitation strike against Russia's missile production. The precision here is just remarkable. According to confirmed intelligence from multiple sources, the strike hit two specific buildings, Workshops 22 and 36. Now, Workshop 22 is where they put together the solid fuel rocket engines. And Workshop 36, that's the final assembly line for missiles like the Iskander and Oreshnik. Taking these two out doesn't just slow Russia down. For the foreseeable future, it's a full stop on production. Now, of course, for hours, the Kremlin tried to spin this, claiming they'd shot down a drone. But eyewitness video, filmed just 500 meters away, tells a very different story. You can see these massive secondary explosions. That's not a drone hitting a roof. That's a warhead finding exactly what it was looking for, a stockpile of finished missiles or rocket fuel. So, the billion-dollar question is, how on earth did Ukraine pull this off? Well, the answer lies in a weapon that, until now, was just a rumor. A weapon that just made one of the most spectacular combat debuts I've ever seen. Meet the FP5, codenamed the Flamingo. And just look at these numbers. They're staggering. The Flamingo isn't just another drone. It's a full-blown cruise missile. It has a 3,000-kilometer range, which actually outranges Russia's own Caliber missile. And the warhead, it's a massive 1,150 kilograms. That's more than double a Caliber, which totally explains those massive secondary explosions. This is, for all intents and purposes, Ukraine's Tomahawk, and it means nowhere in European Russia is safe anymore. So how did it sneak past what should be the most protected airspace in Russia? The secret is something called Turkum. You see, most missiles rely on satellites like GPS, but Russia has gotten really good at jamming those signals. The Flamingo, it doesn't need them. It uses a radar altimeter to literally read the contours of the ground, comparing it to a 3D map it has on board. It hugs the terrain, flying low through valleys and between hills, staying completely below the radar horizon of Russia's big S-400 and S-500 air defense systems. And here's the real takeaway from all this. The Vodkinsk strike reveals a fundamental truth about this war. While Russia is relying on its big, bulky, expensive hardware, Ukraine is innovating. They are iterating their software and their navigation code at a blistering pace. They're proving that agile, clever software can be a decisive weapon against a bigger, but much slower-moving enemy. But you have to remember, this war is a brutal two-way street. And while Ukraine was celebrating this incredible strategic success, Russia was unleashing a new and absolutely terrifying tactic on the city of Odessa, a tactic designed to overwhelm even the very best air defenses. Here's how it works. Russia launches a big, high-altitude drone that acts as a carrier, a mothership. It flies towards a city, but it's loaded with 10 to 15 smaller explosive drones. Right at the edge of Ukraine's air defense bubble, it releases its deadly payload. The mothership then just circles up high, acting as a powerful signal relay, which lets drone operators guide the smaller drones into their targets from hundreds of kilometers away. And the effectiveness of this swarm tactic is just terrifying. Overnight, 120 drones were detected heading for Odessa. Now, Ukraine's air defense is arguably the best in the world. They intercepted an incredible 106 of them. That's a 90% success rate. But here's the scary part. The 14 that got through were still enough to cause catastrophic damage. One hit a key energy facility, plunging tens of thousands. This relentless cycle of strike and counterstrike, it's pushing the human cost of this war to a whole new level. And we have to shift our focus from the tech to its most devastating consequence, a cost that isn't measured in dollars, but in human lives. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, as of this morning, Russia's total personnel losses have crossed 1.25 million. Let that sink in for a second. 1.25 million casualties. In just the last 24 hours, Russia lost over 1,000 soldiers. That's an entire battalion, every single day. So why are the losses so shockingly high? Well, analysts are calling this the meat grinder 2.0 phase. In sectors like Pokrovsk, Russian commanders are under enormous pressure from the Kremlin to grab as much land as they can before these peace talks really get going. And that pressure is leading to these desperate, badly planned armored charges straight across open fields and right into Ukrainian defenses. In a recent interview, President Zelensky put this horrifying math into very stark terms. He said that for every single kilometer of land Russia manages to take, they are paying a price of 156 of their own soldiers. It is a level of carnage that's almost impossible to comprehend, and it's being driven by political deadlines, not by military strategy. And while all of this is happening on the ground, a totally different, but just as vicious war is being fought by politicians in Brussels and Geneva. This is the war of diplomacy, of deadlines, and of straight-up political blackmail. And this really lays out the impossible situation. You've got Hungary's Viktor Orban in Brussels holding a 90 billion euro EU aid package hostage, demanding an oil pipeline be reopened. Then you have the Trump administration, which has set a hard June deadline for a peace deal, threatening to cut off all aid if it's not met. And right in the middle is Ukraine, with President Zelensky insisting he will not be forced to trade away his country's land for what he calls a fake peace. So you have to see the Vodkinsk strike in this context. It wasn't just a military operation, it was a political message. It was Ukraine showing the negotiators in Geneva, and especially in Washington, that they are not powerless. The message is crystal clear. If you try to back us into a corner, we have the means to escalate this war in ways you can't control. And all of this brings us to the final critical countdown. We are now in a desperate, high-stakes race against the clock, where every single move on the battlefield directly impacts the political maneuvering happening behind closed doors. This is the road ahead. We're looking at a 4-month window that will probably decide the outcome of this whole conflict. Russia is in a race to grab as much of the Donbass as it can to strengthen its negotiating position. And Ukraine is in a race to prove it can cripple Russia's war machine from the inside before time runs out. And so we're left with this one fundamental question. Is this technological leap, the Flamingo missile, the game changer that lets Ukraine force a real peace? Or will the sheer brutal weight of Russia's manpower win this war of attrition before that can happen? That's a question that the next 4 months are going to answer. This situation is changing by the hour, and we're going to be tracking every single development. Thank you for joining me for this breakdown. Make sure you subscribe for our continuing coverage. We'll see you in the next one.